distracted. You can hold on. You can understand the position that I'm in currently, because I have a group of students who are in the middle of a lesson, right? The middle of this curriculum, and they have to deal with this. No, it's not that it's bad. No, it's just it's distracting. Okay. Yeah. Yes. No worries. Okay. Goodbye. Okay, everybody, let's get started. Yes. Thank you very much for your patience. Let's just address the elephant in the room. You might be hearing the music from next door. This is from a separate class. It's a from what I'm led to believe, it's a class about how music is used to strengthen fascism in a population. How it I'm not too sure. It just invigorates them and brings them to a certain cause much easier. I don't know much about this class. All that I'm aware of is that it is impeding on our lesson, on this lesson that we have planned today. So I apologize for that. I tried calling the university, but they don't seem to care. So I'm going to do my best to deliver this lecture as I normally would. Please just try and tune out the noise from next door. It's a great class. I'm not trying to say that it's a bad class. I just don't think you need a demonstration of it. And that kind of seems counterintuitive, right? Okay. Anyway, today we are going to be looking at the case of PanthaMan. Can everybody see that? Okay, perfect. Everyone, the back? Yes, okay, perfect. PanthaMan. I'm sure you're all aware of him and his story. Particularly, we're looking at him in his unorthodox style of a cult. How he rose to prominence and used his influence, whether that was intentional or unintentional, to do some bad things. It is titled Alternate Monetary Rewards. We're going to get into that shortly. We're essentially going to be looking at how cult leaders don't necessarily need to manipulate people through monetary gain in order to get them to do what they want. So here we go. And yes, these two photos, these were taken from the front lines of the current conflict that is happening today. I'm aware that I'm sure there's some of you in this room who are still being affected by the events happening in Denmark. So believe me, this is a lesson I want to take very seriously, and it's why I'm even more aggravated by what is happening next door. But anyhow, let's not let that get in the way. Let's jump right into it. So PanthaMan began as a gamer on the website known as Viville. Viville, which I'm sure you're all aware of, it is a very popular video sharing platform on the internet. He began as a gamer making small videos with face cams and reactions to the games and rating the games out of 5 Panthers, which gave him his name. Why he settled on Panthers, I'm not too sure, but he did. And he remained as a gamer for most of his career, up until a certain event. An individual by the name of Gustav Wilhelm, there's no relation that historians can make anyhow of Gustav and his connection to Denmark. Yes, he was of Danish origin, but they don't believe that this is what led PanthaMan to start the so-called Denmark takeover. But yes, Gustav Wilhelm was an individual from Denmark who was a big fan of PanthaMan, so big that one might qualify him as a stalker. And he demonstrated that wholeheartedly through his attempt at breaking into PanthaMan's home one night. He found the residence of PanthaMan, climbed in through a window. PanthaMan was able to hide and call the police, and they showed up in time to apprehend Gustav before he could find PanthaMan. It's unclear what his intentions were, if he just wanted to meet him, if he had plans to harm him. Whatever the case, he was reprimanded, taken to jail. He is currently still serving a sentence, actually, for breaking and entering. But the real point of this story is that it led to PanthaMan's new unorthodox style of content. Because after this event, he uploaded a video to Vville entitled Christmas Day Break-In, where he essentially broke down the events of what happened, told a story about how Gustav had forced his way into the house, almost finding him, and he was a very good storyteller in that regard. He was able to paint a very vivid picture with his words, but the real grab of the video was the footage taken. PanthaMan was known to have many security cameras around his mansion. He had quite a home from the money that he had made off of his Vville channel. And so he used the footage from these security cameras and compiled them into this video. So in this 20-minute long story, we essentially see footage of Gustav Wilhelm fumbling with the locks and at one point falling downstairs and racing through the home looking for his idol. And it made for what PanthaMan's fans were calling a very entertaining piece of content. And this soon became his most popular video. So with this new kind of jump into unorthodox territory, PanthaMan saw that there was a surge of activity on his account, saw that it was popular, and decided that he could do more. So he started experimenting with stories. He thought that maybe if he just went in front of the camera and told stories of his life and things that he saw, he would see the same success. But that wasn't the case. What he soon discovered was that what was very popular on Vville was not the stories themselves, but seeing real people struggling with real conflicts, making real mistakes, making real fools of themselves, everything real. And so he transitioned strictly into reviewing these kinds of videos. He would scour the internet, leaving no stone unturned, trying to find the biggest fails, the greatest accomplishments that the internet had to offer. And what he would do essentially is he'd still have the format of a face cam. It'd almost be like a gaming video, only instead of gaming, it was just simply the videos he was reacting to. He wasn't the star of the show. It was the people in the videos that he was reviewing. Through reviewing these various pranks, blunders, and tomfoolery, it was almost like he went through a renaissance on his channel. He went through another surge of popularity. And this is what eventually led to him becoming the most subscribed to individual on Vville, topping the Lizard family. And they had been on top of that website for the last 7 years up until that point. So for him to dethrone them was really a huge deal. But this transition that I was speaking of him going to strictly reviewing videos, of finding videos of real people, it laid down the groundwork for the eventual cult that he was about to create. So let's talk about the rewards of affirmation. This is a principle that we've already spoken about in past cults. But the rewards of affirmation, this is one of the most basic fundamentals of starting a cult. There needs to be some sort of payback or some sort of reward for followers of a cult, for people who participate. Otherwise, they're not going to want to participate. That is the whole cult of capitalism, right? You entice people with money, you entice people with rewards and incentives. And it's the same with other cults that we've seen in history. There has to be some sort of reason that a person has to become invested. Now, for the most part, we've seen that some of the largest cults ever in history have been based on monetary gain, right? Dole out enough cash, you'll be able to get enough people to do whatever you want. But the reason PanthaMan's story is so unique is because he goes past money. In this case, it's all about being seen. It's all about getting that pedestal that you're looking for, to be shown off to the rest of the world. PanthaMan was already a very popular YouTuber, so to have one of your videos, to have your face reviewed by him, to have your, even if it's an embarrassing act of punishment or an embarrassing fail, to be on his channel meant that millions of other people were also seeing you and acknowledging your existence. And very quickly, people became addicted to this, attached to it, unwilling to let it go. There was also the added benefit of gaining fame yourself. Gustav Wilhelm, the individual who broke into PanthaMan's house, gained 200,000 subscribers after the Christmas Day break-in. So it's clear that if you were featured on his channel, not only would you get the affirmation you were looking for, but you could also get, as a perk, some monetary gain, right? You could gain influence on Vville, which could potentially lead to you also making money on your channel. So it was an added perk, but to understand the cult of PanthaMan, you really have to delve into the idea that they were looking for acknowledgement, that these were lonely people who believed that they weren't real, who had gone their entire lives without ever having been in a real relationship with someone, lacking actual connection with another human being. And the internet became their one way of attaching themselves to another person. And PanthaMan proved to be an epic agent, an epic vessel for that. And we could see that. We could see how devoted some of PanthaMan's fans, and they call themselves Panther stans, or as the Danish would go on to call themselves, Pantha stans. The Panther stans, they were very devoted to PanthaMan, and you can start to see the sort of relationship of a cult leader and cult follower here. This is a comment that was left on one of his videos. It says, "If I could give my life in exchange for the gift of your acknowledgement, I would drain my veins. If that is what it takes, a severance, then it will be my neck and not my wrists." And that was left by a user named hullabaloo_23Dave. No one is really sure of what happened to Mr. Hullabaloo here. Some have said that he was a part of the siege of Copenhagen. Others say that he was there at Christianborg Palace when it was raided and eventually killed by the military that was rallied to the scene. It's all conjecture. No one really knows what happened to him. He may have even, unfortunately, committed an act of self-harm, as he stated in this comment. But really, what this sort of shows, and what also the total amount of submissions, or the estimate of total amount of submissions shows, is that PanthaMan had no shortage of devotees, of people who were willing to do whatever it took to be noticed by him. Experts say that the range of total submissions, it starts at 8.5 million. That is the most liberal. It's not a very trusted number, but it's the most liberal. It's like at least 8.5 million to 200 million. And most experts agree it's probably closer to the latter. So there were a lot of people invested in PanthaMan. I'm very glad that the music has quieted down. I'm very sorry that I was so erratic at the beginning. It really threw me off my groove. I hope that the demonstration is over so we can just focus on this, because this is an important lesson. PanthaMan, he's one of the most recent cults that we study in this class, so he will definitely make up a big portion of the exam coming up. So, anyways, thank you so much for your patience. So, if we're talking about affirmation, if we're talking about being seen, you sort of have to raise the stakes naturally, because if like I said, PanthaMan is getting millions of submissions, potentially millions every year, you have to do something to stand out, right? And it wasn't made any better by PanthaMan himself. He refused to hire outside support. He was very particular about his setup. He wouldn't let anyone touch his computer or his editing software or his videos. Like, he was the only one who could edit his videos, who could review them, who could post them. He was a one-man team, and he wanted to keep it that way. He thought that if anyone else touched his work, it would be tarnished. Which, sure, is fine from a craftsman's perspective. If you're a perfectionist, you really want to be the only one who works on your craft. I understand that. But in this case, when you're getting this many videos per day, there's no way that one person can filter through them all. So you have hundreds of thousands of these devoted internet users, of these fans, who are desperate for attention from PanthaMan, and he's unable to focus on all of them because he's spread so thin. And this, again, leads back to the idea of raising stakes. The stakes just continued to rise. People just kept doing more and more. If they were doing stunts, for instance, they would continue doing dangerous stunts, putting their lives into even more risk until they were finally noticed by PanthaMan. If they were doing pranks, the pranks would continue to become more and more elaborate until they got noticed. There are records of hundreds of thousands of people going bankrupt, just spending money to afford these submissions that they would send to PanthaMan, only to receive radio silence. We're talking about very desperate people here. People who are just looking for a simple nod and a "I see you," and not getting it. And it leads to this never-ending cycle of just doing the most that they could. There was also no specific criteria. PanthaMan never went on record saying, you should do this if you want to get noticed, or you shouldn't do this if you want to get noticed. There was never any sort of, recipe to success. It was very enigmatic. Some people who were featured on his video mentioned PanthaMan in the title, others didn't. Some people pleaded for him to react to their video in the description, others didn't. There was no one case. There was no formula to get featured on his channel, which, from a certain standpoint you could respect, because he wasn't catering to anybody. But at the same time, in this sort of context, when there's no criteria, people just scramble. People just go into every single direction looking for any single thing that could set them apart. And as we're about to learn, this can lead to people doing some very drastic and dangerous things. So now we're on the Wall of Legacy. This was essentially the afterlife of the PanthaMan cult. The afterlife is, again, a very core principle of running a cult, of leading a cult. This was reserved for PanthaMan's favorite submissions. Essentially what would happen is PanthaMan, when he did his videos, he would have a wall where he had a few photos pinned. And the photos belonged to the users. The users of videos that were essentially his favorites, the ones that shook him up the most, the ones that excited him the most. And he was very picky when it came to putting people on this wall. As of this point, there were only 2 people on this wall. The Streaming and Whipped Creaming Gang, as well as Leslie Danko. And he would pin their faces on these walls right behind him so that they would always be there as a sort of, again, an afterlife, right? It's a way of living on eternally, of being featured in every single PanthaMan video from that time forward. So it was a huge honor. It was a huge honor, and every single Panther stan wanted to end up on that wall. So it was a further incentive. And it taught Panther stans that there was reward through struggle. That even if you broke the law, even if you risked your well-being, it would all be worth it because you could end up immortalized on the Wall of Legacy. For example, if we're looking at the Streaming Whipped Creaming Gang, essentially the video that got them on the wall was their video on, it was a prank video about a set of stairs. What they did is they got a set of stairs, wet plastic stairs, and they made it so that there was a lever that they pulled. And when they did, it became a slide, essentially. So unsuspecting pedestrians would walk down the set of stairs, one of them would pull a lever, and they'd go sliding down into a nearby pond. As you could probably suspect, 8 of those victims eventually filed a mass lawsuit against these Vville users. And thanks to the Wall of Legacy and the eventual rise in popularity after being featured on PanthaMan's channel, they were able to afford the costs to fight back. But again, it showed that there was reward through struggle, right? Even though they were facing a massive lawsuit and potential jail time, they were immortalized on the wall. And then, in the case of Leslie Danko, she did not survive her descent from the CN Tower. After painting the mural at the very top, she unfortunately fell to her death, and she was awarded a spot on the Wall of Legacy posthumously by PanthaMan, showing that even in death, even if you lose your life trying to impress this Vville user, you could be immortalized, you could live forever, you could be affirmed and acknowledged forever. It was a very dangerous and toxic belief system that PanthaMan was forcing on his followers. Not only that, but it also led to the pattern of imitation which is quite common with these cults, specifically cults that focus on affirmation. After the Streaming and Whipped Creaming gang, after their video went viral and eventually got inducted onto the Wall of Legacy, there was a slew of stare prank videos uploaded to Viville, specifically stare-related prank videos. There were videos of stairs that were electrified, so that someone would be walking down holding the railing and then receive an electrical shock. There were other videos where it was an inflatable set of stairs where somebody would step into it and then fall right through. Or, there was just a plethora of people who would just push people down a set of stairs. As long as there were stairs in the video, there was a surge of them. People trying to emulate what the Streaming and Whipped Creaming users did, hoping that it would get the same reaction from PanthaMan. And the same goes for Leslie Danko. After her death and eventual induction, there was a surge of individuals who were scaling very high buildings, painting graffiti. And this graffiti was appearing all over the world, in New York, Tokyo, New Delhi, everywhere, every continent. And it's led some to believe that maybe this was all intentional. This is sort of a side note, but it would make sense for PanthaMan. It would make sense that this could be intentional because, for one thing, he's testing the waters, right? He's trying to see just how willing his fan base is, to see how far they're willing to go to get noticed by him, right? So the Streaming and Whipped Creaming gang kind of showed that. They were willing to hurt people, put other people in harm's way in order to be noticed. And then in the case of Leslie Danko, he saw that people were willing to put their lives on the line in order to be noticed by him. And it just seems so eerily coincidental, right? Because maybe, just maybe, he was testing the waters to see if an invasion of Denmark was possible before it even happened. And of course we're going to get into this later, but it's very difficult to one can make assumptions, but there's no evidence to prove such a theory. It's such a gray area when it comes to PanthaMan. And we're going to talk about him and responsibility in a second and why it took so long for him to be imprisoned and the sort of loopholes that exist in the legality system today, which hopefully we can change. So now we're going to be talking about the beginnings of the PanthaMan Denmark takeover, which again I've sort of alluded to over the past few minutes. And when you think of PanthaMan, of course, this is the first thing that comes to mind. This was sort of the icing on the cake of his career, although I don't think that's really how I'd want to describe it. It was an awful loss of life and something that really could have been avoided. But it all started with Hans Ziegel and Agnes Larsen. They were the very first Panthastans in Denmark. They were veterans of the channel. They had been watching him for years at this point, and they were hell-bent on getting onto the channel, on being reviewed by PanthaMan. So they had an idea. They decided what they were going to do is they were going to the Christiansborg Palace. This is essentially their main government building in Denmark. They went to the Christiansborg Palace with the support of 20 other Panthastans that they recruited, and they stood in front of the entrance and they blocked it. They blocked all entryways to the palace. They wanted to essentially delay all government dealings of that day. They wanted to stop well-known ministers and well-known politicians in the country of getting in. They essentially wanted to raise the stakes as high as they could. They wanted to go straight to the government, to the highest officials they could, and assert their dominance. And they figured that this would be a good video. And you know what? It was. PanthaMan loved it. It was featured in his daily video. I believe the title of the video, just off of memory, it was day 1486. And the reaction videos on that was he reviewed Puppy Goes Airborne, sinking a soccer ball into an open casket, bodying Danish politicians was how he worded it, and then skipping people like rocks. I'm going off of memory here. Most of his videos have been taken down, as you know, but I believe that was day 1486 was the day that this video was uploaded. And he loved it. He spent 15 minutes just rewatching the video, which is the most time he's ever spent on anything else. And of course, Agnes and Hans were then inducted onto the wall of legacy. He loved it in particular, mainly because he thought that it was an act of revolution. PanthaMan, as we're going to get into, was either very smart in the character that he created for himself, or he naturally was just very naive and unaware of global affairs and what was going on in the world. He saw this video and assumed that there was political unrest in Denmark. He assumed that the political situation there was corrupt, and that this video that Hans and Agnes had uploaded was an attempted revolution. And so he loved it. He supported it openly. He wanted to see more of it. And again, of course, he inducted into the Wall of Legacy. So he really respected their cause. Now, what he may have not been aware of was that the Wall of Legacy did provide the criteria that Panther stands were looking for, right? Because before the Wall of Legacy, before Screaming and Whipped Creaming, before they were the first ones to be inducted, there was no criteria, there was no recipe to success, as I said before. But now, with the induction of the Wall of Legacy, it gave them a sense, it gave them an idea. It made the Panther stand say, okay, he really liked the fact that they blocked the entrance to the palace. So maybe if we do the same thing, we could potentially get reviewed as well. Our video could go just as viral. And that's essentially what happened. Panther stands flocked to Denmark. They were looking for the affirmation. They were looking for the reward that was promised to them. And these weren't just Danish Panther stands either. Now they were coming from England. They were coming from Germany. Even from the United States and Canada. They were from Japan and China. They were from Africa too. They were coming from all over the world, and coming to the Christianborg Palace in particular. Now, obviously, I could get into the nitty-gritty about how they raided the palace afterwards, how they took politicians hostage, and then I could get into the lengthy war that followed in the Siege of Copenhagen. But really, we're looking at the study of cults. And really, all we need to know here is how the single influence of PanthaMan swayed hundreds of thousands of young individuals into flying to a country they've never been to harass politicians, all in the hopes of being seen. And it really puts in perspective the sort of cult leader and cult follower relationship that we have been discussing for the past few months. It really puts in perspective how much power he had over them. And I thought they were done. Anyway, did I miss anything? Is everyone following? Okay, this has me a bit frazzled. I apologize. I'm used to working in complete silence, so this is just. I apologize. Essentially, to summarize. It was PanthaMan's sole influence. It was the induction on the Wall of Legacy. Agnes and Hans being inducted onto the Wall of Legacy that led thousands of individuals to flock to Denmark, hoping to do the same in the hopes of being noticed by PanthaMan. That was what led to the Panther Stand Denmark takeover. That was the catalyst. That was the spark. Like I said, this is where a lot of the cult symptoms really begin to show. The Panther stands were willing to die for the leader or the vision of their leader, and the leader in question was being PanthaMan. There were so many accounts during both the raid of the Christianborg Palace and then the Siege of Copenhagen where these young individuals were literally running straight into gunfire with their phones directly in front of their face, being shot dead right then and there. And then those who survived were completely unfazed by the death that was around them. They were fully committed to their cause. Again, this sort of leads into the tunnel vision as well. They were so focused on one goal, on being noticed, that they were completely oblivious to the damage and havoc that both they were causing and the havoc that was just happening all around them in general. And there's also the hive mentality. And this is very clear when we're talking about PanthaMan. These were a whole group of people, of individuals, human beings that are all intricately unique, but they were all brought together through PanthaMan and through their desire to please him. And that led to them kind of coalescing into one group. And that's what made them such a danger in Denmark as well. It's why the Danish military really had no answer for them. Even though they had superior equipment, they had artillery, they had air force, tanks, the sheer numbers of the Panther stands overwhelmed them completely. Eventually they ran out of bullets, they got completely surrounded. And these Panther stands just, even though they were numerous, they all managed to work together as one. And this is why the Panther cult is so notorious, because it had and still does have the potential to destabilize entire governments and potentially expand to the rest of the world. So it's very topical even today. We also see the parent principle here, specifically with PanthaMan and how he handled the situation. We were talking about the affirmation, the affirmation principle earlier. How Panther stands were seeking acknowledgement, of wanting to know that they existed, and they thought that the only way that they could attain this was through PanthaMan. And in the same way, a child seeks this through a parent. A child desperately will, do dances for their parents. They will strive for their attention. They will look to get a laugh or a smile out of their parents. Someone who they deem as superior and holy almost. And we can see parallels with the Panther stands. They sort of had the same relationship. They wanted nothing more than to make their leader smile, to have their good opinion. And in a cult, this principle can really be abused by the leader. When you have that kind of sway over someone, when you are that important to a person, you can make them do essentially whatever you wish. And unfortunately, this was kind of put on full display by PanthaMan himself. Essentially, he denied it at first. He acted as though he had no idea that anything was happening in Denmark. He wasn't aware of the Christianborg Palace raid, where dozens of Panther stands were killed, not even counting the military deaths and civilian casualties as well. And even with his denial, he never spoke out against it or denounced it in any way. Instead, he joined the live stream, the many live streams that were taking place in Denmark. These were live streams hosted by Panther stands, those who were taking place in the palace raids and those taking place in the various skirmishes that were occurring across the country. He joined the live stream and simply watched. And he didn't, again, he never looked at it in a positive light or a negative light. He simply reacted. Most of his videos during this time were simply relaying live streams on his channel. You could still see him in his reaction, just sitting there watching, but he would never say much, he would never do much. He would just give it attention. And this 48-hour stream went on to top Viville charts. Everyone was just in awe of what they saw as a spectacle. That PanthaMan and his fans were able to essentially invade a country and bring it to its knees. They were hypnotized. And this reinvigorated the Panther Stand movement in the country as well. It had the attacks had sort of slowed down, and there weren't really many skirmishes going on at the moment. But as soon as he made this 48-hour stream, there was a surge in attacks. Suddenly, they were more organized more than ever. They had received the affirmation from their parent figure just as they had intended, and once they did, they latched onto it. They thought, okay, he's watching us. We need to do more of what we're doing right now. And this is where I believe, yes, okay, we're on this next slide now. It sort of transitions into this. This is where it's really hard to say of whether or not PanthaMan had any control over what was going on, and therefore it takes away some of the responsibility on his part. For instance, PanthaMan, during his live stream, there was a clip noted by certain individuals that he reviewed, wherein a Panther stand gave medical aid to an elderly Danish individual. And PanthaMan gave a positive reaction to this. He said, "This is good, right? Like, you know, we got to help the elderly, man." I'm pretty sure that was one of his exact quotes. And for the next couple days afterwards, there was an upswing in medics in the Panther stand ranks. Panther stands would go house to house looking to see if anyone needed medical attention. They would patch up wounds. They started rebuilding homes that were damaged in bombings. They would drag enemy soldiers to safety and patch them up. But then on the flip side of the coin, PanthaMan would see war crimes being committed by Panther stands. He would see them defile corpses, walk into civilian areas and mow down non-combatants. And he spoke out against this in the live stream. He said, "This is awful. I hate this. Delete this now." And yet there was still the same reaction as before. Instead of them helping soldiers now, after his reaction, they started to gun them down. They started to go into homes and kill innocent families. They started to torture individuals and live stream it. So we can see here that it wasn't necessarily a positive reaction or a negative reaction they were searching for from PanthaMan. They just wanted attention. They were just looking for him to notice what they were doing and to comment on it. This is where the parent principle really shines. This is where the parent principle is really abused by most cult leaders, because the sort of parent and child relationship they're looking for is a neglected relationship. A cult leader in this situation wants to be the parent that doesn't give their child enough attention, because then that makes them more. It makes them more willing to go above and beyond. It makes them more susceptible to do what the leader wants them to, in order to kind of receive that affection that they've been longing for. Unfortunately, though, this is again where it kind of leads into the fact that PanthaMan may not have actually realized what he was doing. He may really have been naive and unaware. He may have just simply lost control of his Panther stance. Because usually cult leaders will keep an iron grip on their followers, right? Like they'll continue with this kind of neglected structure of a relationship, but they'll have a kind of a clear goal in sight, something that they can always be working towards. Whereas PanthaMan didn't have that. His criteria was very vague. All that the Panther stands wanted was his attention, and they could do that in a slew of ways, as had been proven. And so it was really hard to kind of keep a harness on them. He also never, I think I may have already mentioned this, but he never called for any videos directly. He never said, "Let's invade Denmark." He never said, "Hey, let's make those stairs, let's turn those stairs into a slide," or "Let's climb the CN Tower and paint a mural." He never directly called for any of these things, which is why the courts were never able to actually put out a warrant for his arrest, despite world leaders and public figures calling for his arrest. There was really no charge that they could bring to him. Of course, he was eventually arrested after the Jakarta archery incident, because again, that was a video that he called for directly. But before that, there was really they never had any grounds to arrest him, and it's one of also the main reasons why many of his submissions are still locked up in his own personal safe, because the courts believe that other than the video containing the Jakarta archery incident, all of the other submissions have no bearing on the case whatsoever. So we're talking about hundreds of millions of submissions. This is years worth of footage, unseen footage, that is just locked up somewhere, just waiting to be found. It's a database unlike any other. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. Essentially, the videos that he reviewed swayed the invasion, whether he liked it or not. But whether or not he actually had that intention, that is still up for debate. And it's something that still, to this day, cannot be proven unless he gives a confession. And it's one of the reasons why he was able to get away with being a cult leader for so long. And I'm not a lawmaker myself, but again, this is one of the loopholes that I was kind of mentioning earlier, where a cult leader really can flourish under the guise of naivete. And there must be an amendment or some other change made in order to combat this, to prevent this from happening, to prevent another PanthaMan from happening again. And again, the PanthaMans were just constantly looking for attention. Like I said, they were always raising the stakes. They were just beating dead horses, repeating the same things that they saw in other videos. And this just exacerbated the invasion, because once Agnes and Hans were on that wall of legacy, they knew that it was just a matter of continuing the way things were in Denmark. It was just a matter of fighting a little bit harder, or going a little bit, becoming a little bit more aggressive at the palace. And they knew that if they just made things bigger and better, then they could be reviewed and they could be viewed and acknowledged by PanthaMan. So, at the end of this, it really begs the question, what do you do when you have a cult leader who has control over potentially millions of people? We're really unsure of just how many Panther stands there are still in the world today. Most of them are believed to be held up in Denmark. The display of PanthaMan memorabilia is illegal in most countries, not here. So I understand why I've seen a couple people still wearing their merch. I do not support it. I'll be clear about that, but it's still legal, so you can do what you will. It's a free country. The question becomes, how do we prevent this from happening again, right? Or how do we prevent the Panther stands from attacking again? PanthaMan himself is under arrest currently. He is in prison. He has no access to the internet currently. But after he serves his sentence for the Jakarta archery incident, the question now is, what if he does go back on the internet? What if he tries to rally up his followers again? Well, I think that currently what we're doing with PanthaMan kind of answers that question for us. We remove the leader from all forms of contact. Specifically in this case, an internet-based cult. I think that the first thing we do is we cut them off from the internet. And it would be an added bonus if we can have the leader cooperate as well. There's no word yet on if PanthaMan is cooperating with authorities, but if PanthaMan were willing to essentially put out videos saying, Panther stands, stand down, or if he was willing to review videos of Panther stands leaving Denmark and returning to their home countries, that would be even better. Sort of, again, or even better, inducting one of them onto the wall of legacy. That would be cooperation. That could potentially lead to another surge of Panther stands leaving Denmark and returning to their countries, and hopefully bringing an era of peace again to the nation. So again, in this situation, if you had an internet-based cult, the ideal situation would be that the leader, in exchange for clemency or a plea deal, they'd be willing to sort of help control their fan base and bring them back to their home safely and sort of unindoctrinate them if possible. If that is not possible, if this population is beyond talking to, which many believe that the current Panther stands in Denmark, they believe that they're sort of in a similar state. I would say that the best case scenario would be to surround the affected area, which is what they have been doing in Denmark. Sort of militarize the borders. Do not provoke them, but just keep an eye on them in case there is sort of a foray into the territory. and to disable the internet if possible. Right now, that is not in effect. It's currently deemed inhumane to disable the internet services above Denmark only. So currently, Panther stands still have access to Vivo. Videos from Denmark are still being uploaded daily. It is believed that there is going to be an amphibious assault on the mainland of Denmark soon by a coalition of Panther stands, which is scary news to hear. Really, if we're talking about affirmation, if you can take away that affirmation, you take away the power. So if you get rid of the internet, you disable them immediately, really. You disable the entire movement. If they can't be noticed, if they can't be viewed, then really they'll see that there's no sense of purpose there. The only downside would be that if you do disable the internet in Denmark, they may move on to other territories that do have internet, and we may see large migrations of people into these territories, and we might see a whole other sort of Denmark conflict, similar to the likes that we're seeing currently. So I can understand why they don't want to disable the internet out of the potential repercussions that might occur. But something must be done. It's clear that something has to be done. It's just kind of it's a headache to determine what exactly. That is going to conclude our class for today. I'm very sorry for my erratic behavior. I'm so thrown off by what's happening next door. None of you care about this, but Professor Still runs this class, and he actually, I was in classroom 261. That's the one right next door to here. A couple weeks ago, I was teaching a lesson, and apparently the lesson was deemed unworthy by the university, and it was cut from the curriculum. And I'll admit, it was. Okay. Yeah, we're done.